Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I was on the phone a moment ago and, hang on a moment. This is a fantastic photograph straight away. Neil, you haven't even got into your first sentence and you're digressing. I know, but it's another one of those beautiful, it's a chilly day, but another sunny day, and I can see this tree in front of me that really is isolated. There's just this shaft of light coming through the forestry here. I'm in another woodland, another forest. You know I like my forests. And this one really is being isolated. Let me get a picture and stop talking before the light disappears and I can't isolate the tree anymore. I'm on the X100 V, f4, shutter speed 450th, ISO 160. Yeah, look at that. I've actually isolated the tree properly. Last week's attempts were a bit suspect, weren't they? Yes, they were, Neil. Right, yes, I was on the phone to Anna, my friend Anna, just a moment ago. And I was saying I've turned right to get away from the crowds who'd parked in the car park close to where I am today. And I went off the beaten track straight away and I said, you know what, I think I'm actually lost. She said it would be very funny if you did get lost. And I assume she meant that geographically, not in the other sense. But she said it would be funny because then the whole thing could fall apart and it would be quite amusing. And welcome to the one where that actually may happen, because I am standing in the middle of forestry, no path at all. There's a sort of a path here, so we'll see where we get with it. This isn't necessarily new advice, and I dare say many of us have received these words at some stage in our lives, but there's a film trailer for an incredible project that I was introduced to by Kelly Mitchell, another one of our wonderful patrons. And from the film, there are the following words: find something that you like to do, that you enjoy, and follow it. You'll find a lot of satisfaction and happiness with what you do because you're doing something that you love. For me, that is, that says everything I feel about this podcast. But for you, that could be everything you feel about making, I don't know, the pictures of the waves at dawn, or a busy Saturday taking pictures of the city just moving around you, or a quiet woodland, trying to find the perfect tree that you can isolate against the others. That sort of thing. The one that quietly says, look at me. That kind of tree. Anyway, those words: find something that you like to do, that you enjoy, and follow it. You'll find a lot of satisfaction and happiness with what you do because you're doing something that you love. They are words spoken by a subject or a real-life character within a film made by a photographer called Robert Scott in a project called The Secondary Highway. I'll pop the trailer on the show page today so you can see what I'm talking about. So Rob, has made these incredible photo stories about people and the houses within the wilds that they once lived. They still majestically hold these houses that are falling down, this position on the Canadian horizon, miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, and a few more miles from anywhere. And the beauty of his photo project, talking to these people, was that it became deeply personal for him. It meant something to him. He alone was passionate about his vision, and I love it. A fantastic idea to talk to these people about the houses that they once grew up in that are now tumbled down and being reclaimed by the earth. Goodness knows how he found some of these people, but he did, and that's become his complete passion. And whilst I eulogise about his projects and the sentiments, I want to mention today's guest, a German-born photographer called Annette Lang, who for the past 2 decades has lived in Nice on the Côte d'Azur. And it's not so long ago that she began to photograph the people who walked the promenade, I suppose, the shoreline, the promenade, and sat in the famous blue seats that line the seafront along this famous shoreline in Nice. And I think I can safely say she was, as per Robert really, drawn to a personal project that's become, I think, her life in many respects. And projects, they can do that to us, can't they? Beware the project in a positive way, because they can become all-consuming. So today's guest is Annette Lang, who's been making the most exquisitely wonderful observations of people going about their everyday against a deep blue canvas in a country which is fair to say protects people's privacy passionately. So that brings about some questions in itself when you start to make street portraits and street pictures.
Today on the Photowalk.
So quite often what happens is when I take photos in which people are identifiable, either I approach people directly afterwards that I never want to intrude. So for instance, if they are, enjoying time to themselves, I wouldn't go and step forward and say, you know what, I just took your photo. This is a small place, so I quite often run into the same people again.
Annette Lang then talks today of her photo project, photographing along the beautiful shorefront of Nice, pictures of people on a blue canvas, a wonderfully potent project for its beautiful simplicity, yes, but Annette has so much more to say about our responsibility to photographing people on the street. And also today, more of your stories about what photography means to you, why you make pictures, what do you make them about, how your camera helps you to see the world. A very different type of photography podcast, made out in the wilds on a walk, me with my camera, you with yours, earbuds in and a mailbag of letters, and former guests with snippets of inspiration, including Madison Thorne on her High Risk Humans project, and Mark Wilson on one of the hardest photo stories to tell. I'll tell you about today's letter topics in a moment. First though, lend me a minute, will you, so I can share something about those who support this photo walk. My friends at mpb.com support and sponsor this show, and it's a service I use and share with you very confidently. They are the #1 platform in the UK, the US and Europe, with bases in Brighton and Brooklyn and Berlin when it comes to buying, trading or selling quality used kit online, helping photographers to buy and trade and sell the kit we need to tell our stories. Buy used, spend less and get more. And this is important, be a part of the circular economy. That kit that's become unused, maybe unloved in your drawer, will be the kit that's about to be a best friend in the kit bag of somebody new or somebody else. Go to mpb.com and buy, sell, trade and create. Our patrons too are so precious with your generous and thoughtful help to keep the show ticking. And I'll share the thoughts of some of our patrons of the week, Andrew Hardacre and Nikki Heppenstall, later, as they share what they love about this thing we do or have, that being photography. Today then, your letters. Well, we talk 360s. I have an apology to make. We also wonder whether uninvited critique of our work is something we should or need to take note of. We think about being a tourist in our own towns with a camera or exploring the hometown we usually don't. More misty pics and some news of how even if you're not there physically, well, you're going to be a part of this forthcoming photo walk retreat. Shall we walk then? Coffee and Garibaldi's? Definitely check. Boots on and laced? Check. Warm walking pants? Check. Spare batteries? Check. Fillmore cards? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off? Let's walk. We are starting this week with our Facebook membership. We have a great Facebook group. We do have a page, but we have a private group that you can become a member of as long as you're wearing the right type of trainers, obviously. But we have some great conversations in there, and it's a very friendly group. Actually, it's a group where I don't see it as a point-scoring group like some groups can be. I mean, sometimes it gets just a tad edgy, and I have to nudge myself in and peer over my glasses. But really, on the whole, we have some fabulous members in there that truly do help each other. So let me start with two very different kinds of photo stories from the Facebook group this week that I thought I'd like to introduce you to, just in case you didn't see the post, or indeed you're not a member of the Book of Face. One is an apology that I have to make, slightly tongue-in-cheek, and one much darker in terms of subject, light and shade, if you will. But I have an apology to make right now at the start of the show to one Andrew Chambers, who showed 4 pictures on the feed last week on Facebook, in the Facebook group. He said, trying out my new Christmas present, the Insta360 One X2. The pictures were taken on a walk along the canal at West Byfleet in Surreyland. This is the start of my year's project in the round, black and white. See, this 360 stuff absolutely fascinates me. And I've seen photographers use it fantastically well for all kinds of applications. Michael Schilling, he's mentioned within the thread, he uses it for making films, and it's probably the more regular application of using the 360 camera. But Andrew's used it to make these sublime stills. They're kind of, I'm going to describe them as mini worlds, and you're right in the middle of them, and all these pictures are round. So it's not a square or rectangle, landscape, portrait, they're round pictures, the 360 round world. And you're kind of, I suppose it feels like you're wrapped up, the picture makes you feel like you're wrapped up in a ball, and then it's laid out flat as a round 2D that doesn't seem to have a start or an end. Am I describing this well enough for you? I think you're doing all right, Neil. You're not too bad. I'll pop them on the show page today, and then you'll say, "Oh, that's what he meant." Oh, right. Why didn't he say? But they're in black and white. They're all in black and white, and some of them they really truly make me feel like I'm a very small creature looking up into this big wide world. If you like, I called it a butterfly's perspective. If she were to land on the carpet of moss in the woods, for example, you can probably hear the wind today, can't you? We've had a few storms of late. There's a few trees gone down here as well, but it's gentler today. But I have sunk myself out in the woods, not out, in the woods, because I've got a lot more wind cover for the microphone today. But anyway, sorry. So yes, so these wonderful pictures, as I say, I'll leave some examples on the show page. And I thought, well, I must comment. I was taken by the pictures. I thought they look great. But I made the daftest of comments, really. I simply went in and left something rather inane, saying, "Interesting indeed," I said. "I see a set of plates." I mean, that's about as unenthusiastic as you can get about somebody's work, can't you? That's great. Have you thought about putting it on a china set of plates? I mean, really. It's the start of a study. And I've committed it to a set of plates, the type that sit in the mail on Sunday. So apologies, Andrew, deep apologies. I have had a sharp word with myself and shown myself a yellow card. In fact, if I could have done, I'd have looked over the glasses at myself. And I went back in, and I've awarded you one of those new stickers that Facebook have allowed us all to start giving each other. I've given you a positive vibes one. There we go. And an apology. And I did say light and shade, didn't I? So I was stunned by this post, and it's a real indication of the good work that goes on in the group once more. So last Thursday was Holocaust Memorial Day, wasn't it? And I saw this post, unfortunately, just after recording last week's show. So I am a week later on it, when it would have been good to have mentioned it within the show last week, I know. But all the same, it came from Paul Rolson. Let me describe the picture and read you the words in his post. It's a black and white photograph Paul made from his visit to one of the most fearsome places on earth, Auschwitz-Birkenau. He made the picture over a decade ago. It was actually 14 years ago that he made this picture, and it features a visitor sitting at the end of the section of railway that leads into the camp. It's that infamous, chilling scene where those taken to Auschwitz were, there's no other word really, unloaded from the railway trucks after their arduous, terrible journeys. It's a black and white picture, and the man's face who's sitting down, you can't see. He's kind of slumped forward, and he's reading from a small book, which may be a guidebook, but it looks to me like it's a book of prayers. He's definitely all alone with his thoughts. There's no doubt about that. And there's a wreath either side bearing words in Hebrew, and the rails behind him, they lead straight into this hell with a set of points that can take more trains to the left, which gives you this idea of the utter evil that you should need more landing stages, that one wasn't enough. It's a descriptive piece, narratively, within the pictorial potency of this particular picture that Paul's made. But then he had some words that went with it. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Poland, 2008, he writes. This was an unplanned, candid shot, and I've no idea who the man is. I originally uploaded this to Flickr in 2008. Not long afterwards, someone in the comments advised me to crop out the building at the end of the railway line. And then Paul writes, this is why we should never listen to unrequested critique from strangers. And I'd be interested to have your thoughts on this. Now, I suppose when we put things out into the world, and we talked about this actually with my reprobate buddy Mullins on the Fuji cast, and there is this thing that when you put things out into the world, now that can be a picture, it can be an Instagram post, or it's a picture, Neil, yes. It could be a Facebook film or a YouTube film. You know, you're not necessarily inviting comments. You're not inviting people to criticise, either positively or otherwise. But once it's out into the world, that's the kind of thing that happens, isn't it? And you will get comments, you will get thoughts that don't entirely match with your own, or indeed when it's photography, they certainly don't match necessarily with the intent by which you made the photograph and what you were trying to say. But all the same, I was, along with you, Paul, I mean, I was surprised that this chap missed the contextual point of where the lines were leading. They were leading towards the entrance to this hideous place on Earth. And the composition, Paul, was so powerful. And it seemed to me, though, that this chap was suggesting you crop out what for those people, you know, being taken there was the sad and in many respects unfortunate literal end of the line. So to miss the building, no, it doesn't make sense at all, does it? Christopher O'Sullivan waded into the debate. He said, I've never understood this modern habit of cutting out painful history, whatever the reason. That building is a monument, as are the tracks, and the human touch gives an air of the journey of life to me. Jim Westlake really summed it up. I don't know why I should be, but I'm amazed at the ignorance of historical events out there. For momentous events such as the Holocaust, we forget at our peril. So I think pictures like yours, Paul, are really, really important. You seem to sum up that place with that picture. You really did. I did ask Paul for some further pictures, so I could post this and some others on the show page today, which I will do. But Paul spent some time gathering his further thoughts on this. I'm going to link through to that, and I'm really thankful that he did this. He went away and wrote a photo essay, and so we haven't had a photo essay for a while, and a few are going to pop up within this show at the same time. But photo essay, thank you, Paul. Right, inspiration. I spoke with Mark Wilson, who had produced this book, Wounded Landscapes, bearing witness to the Holocaust. This would have been probably midway last year when I interviewed Mark. He'd been making a photo story book about the horrors of that time. And here's a few words about the project that he made that's now a book.
So this was one of the ladies, Rita, that I met in Tel Aviv. And she's an amazing, incredible lady. And her first language was, she was born in Transylvania, Romania. And Hebrew was a language, and Romanian, etc. And English was her third or fourth language. But going back to what we said, when I met her, she actually spoke to me for 3-4 hours in English. And she told me when we started talking, she said, Mark, I'm going to talk to you in English because I want you to understand and hear everything I'm going to tell you right now, which was, a beautiful thing, obviously. And then her daughter was there at the time, Ronit. And they became good friends. And then the next day after meeting Rita, I kind of went to see Ronita again in her apartment. And she told me, and we were having some cake, and it was some birthday cake. And she told me that, this was one of her mother's Auschwitz recipes. And my reaction when she said those words, Auschwitz recipes, was all these horrific things that go through your head, as, I think you do when you read that.
Yeah.
And then she told me the story of it, which was really beautiful. Just basically when her mother was in Auschwitz, which is one of the many places she was kept in, when she was a young girl, that she'd lie awake at night in the bunks and she was afraid. And all the older women, they would talk about food and they would recite the recipes that they made. And they recite these recipes, one, because it was their way of staving off the hunger in a way by talking about it, but also so they wouldn't lose them. And so that Ronnie told me that when she was younger and her mum would make, cake or birthday cake, etc., that it became known as the Auschwitz recipes because it was one of the recipes that her mother had learnt while she was like a 16-year-old, lying at night in the barracks there.
Words from Mark Wilson, and I will link to Mark's project on the show page today. Oh, you're very noisy up there. You keeping an eye out on me, are you? I see. You seem to be following me around. Should I feel... Yes. Should I feel a bit awkward about that? Because, and Anna will now laugh, I truly believe I'm lost. What have you done, Neil? Well, I walked half an hour one way, and I sort of zigzagged as I went. For those coming on the Photowalk retreat next week, I'll not be doing that, by the way. I'll be far more organised. But when I'm on my own, I don't know. I'm kind of like, turn left, turn right. Should we turn left here? Let's see where that delivers us. On the subject of photo essays, and we haven't talked about this for quite some time, really. If you have a project, something that you've seen or somewhere that you've been, why not consider it for a photo essay on our website? And we have another photo essay. There's two. Another photo essay up in the air from Andrew Hardacre this week, who's written a piece about the photographer a great many of us are probably inspired by, the great Henri Cartier-Bresson, which seems very appropriate this week, doesn't it? Because, of course, we're talking with my guest Annette Lang today about street photography in France. It's a fabulous piece of writing by Andrew, and you'll get some pictures on there as well that he's written his observations of the way HCB worked, actually right through toward the end of his life as well, and the changes that came toward the end of his life and how he felt about photography. And Andrew's also included some pictures that he's made inspired by the great HCB as well. Some super street pictures on there as well. It's wonderful to hear from our friends, those that have written in before, but it's also fabulous to hear from those that have just joined the podcast. If you're new, welcome. Or maybe those that have been listening for a while that have never written and have just thought out of the blue, do you know what, I'll write this weekend. I'll send some pictures or some thoughts. And this is a first-time mail from Patrick Britschke. Dear Neil, when the pandemic interrupted our lives, I picked up 2 new habits. Careful. Walking regularly, well, that's not a bad habit, and listening to your podcast. Well, I'm sure there are cures available, Patrick. So I went for my regular walk last Sunday, and as usual, listened to the podcast. I came across some trees in Zug, Switzerland land. I remembered you talking about your sketchbook images of forests and woods. Yes, I mentioned it a moment ago, didn't I? So I thought I'll have a go too, with my smartphone in this case. Maybe I might make a series of trees at Lake Zug or so one day. Who knows? The podcast I was listening to was your edition with Madison Thorne, and I thought, wow, her music pictures are exactly the sort of thing that I'm doing. I love taking pictures at local concerts, although I've had the honour also to cover some concerts of some big names like Miles Davis. Miles Davis? Whoa! That is... Yes, that's an honour indeed. I appreciate the small stages, though, with their intimate mood, where the audience can literally feel the creative energy. Most of my work goes to the festival organiser who presents a selection of photographs to their website. The other part of my work is totally different. And he's put in brackets, is it? Maybe not. Street photography. You've talked much about how to approach your subjects, and I have a couple of observations, actually. I find it extremely important to be decent and humble and honest to the people that I photograph. And I definitely enjoy street photography most, it seems, when I'm actually traveling, which helps my street work in two ways. One, I have time during the day where I can hang around and just observe. And two, as a tourist, I seem to be more acceptable as a person who just takes pictures of everything. There's very good thoughts, very good observations there, Patrick, because there's a lot to be said, isn't there, for being a tourist with a camera. So I'm pretty much the same when I'm in a new place, Patrick. My tourist camera, well, I don't know, it seems to be my Potteresque cloak of invisibility in many respects. I don't seem to mind lifting it to my eye as much and making the kind of pictures that I might not be brave enough to make otherwise. I remember actually, where was it? Croatia. In the days we used to take holidays. Remember those things that used to fly through the air? What were they called? Completely forgotten. Anyway, in Croatia, yes, there were some lads that were just jumping off the side of the harbour, having so much fun. And I remember making pictures thinking, if I were in my town, not that I live next to the coast, but would I be making the same pictures? Maybe I wouldn't be. But that particular day, I must dig those pictures out. The holiday, what is this word? Holiday, what was that word? Holiday? No, that must be a made-up word. But do you know what, Patrick? Maybe we should assume tourist eyes whenever we work locally as well. Maybe it might not be so easy to do, but perhaps that'd be the way, wouldn't it? To assume or rather pop in our tourist eyes whenever we go out with our camera. It doesn't matter whether it's 5 minutes from our door or 5,000 miles from our door, but it could certainly be an effective way to find our photographic courage. I've left a link on the show page to Patrick's website, which will take you to his music work and observations of the street. And I've included a half dozen photographs too on the show page today that Patrick kindly sent in. I love, by the way, that busy street shot you made at night. The officer directing traffic and the blur of the people moving around him. I'm imagining, was it handheld? There was me, worried about bringing a tripod out because I like to travel light, but you've been walking the streets at night with your tripod. Oh, it must be a tripod one. It looks far too steady. But it's a cracking shot. Go and have a look at it. It's on the show page. And since you mention her, Patrick, guess who wrote in with some pictures from walks that she's been making recently? The wonderful Madison Thorne. It was a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks ago now, wasn't it, that we talked with Madison about her project, High Risk Humans. And she sent in a letter. Hello, Neil. Here's a couple of shots from a recent photo walk I did. Nashville got an unprecedented 6.5 inches of snow. That 0.5, very important. So I ventured downtown to visit the Mother Church, the beautiful and historic venue, the Ryman, and see how the never-ending onslaught of tourists were holding up in the weather. Tourists? That's another word like holiday. Tourists? No, I don't know that word. Though I live half a mile from the heart of the city, I tend to avoid it at all costs. So it was a welcome challenge to try and capture the scene in a new light. Great show today. Haven't heard the idea. Oh, this was last week you were listening. Heard the idea along the lines of we don't take a picture of what it is, but of what we feel. How incredible is that? She said. It certainly validates a lot of my work, and validation is always welcomed. Oh, says Madison, and I received this text straight after the show that warmed my cold heart. She says, so thank you again for helping me share my stories on the show. Do you mind if I share the text? You didn't say that I shouldn't share it. Oh, I could be in trouble. Could be in trouble now from Madison. We've only just started our friendship and I'm in trouble. The text read, Hi Madison, just heard your interview on Photography Daily and wanted to commend you for your project work. I have a slightly different angle on high risk and definitely understand the points you've made. My daughter is type 1 diabetes. By coincidence, today is her 6-year liverversary. We've gone through similar experiences, frustrations and tears. It's inspiring to hear you take that energy and place it into a project. So thank you. Be well. Thank you, Madison, for your mail, for your message. And I feel we should probably play a few moments from your episode 277. I know you didn't ask me to play this, but I'm going to play it anyway. Making pictures of the so-called high-risk humans. Madison talks about how this project actually started.
There were protests in downtown Nashville where people showed up and demanded the reopening of businesses. They had felt like quarantine had gone on for too long, so they showed up in numbers, and someone in that crowd made the news. They were on the news, and they had a sign that said, "Sacrifice the weak, reopen businesses." And the weak refers to the high risk. It refers to me. It refers to a lot of my friends and loved ones. And like I said, I thought I was already in the darkest point. And then some stranger had decided what my life was worth. And they told me it was worth nothing. So that put me in bed for 2 or 3 days. It knocked me out. And then I remember laying in bed and kind of coming up with this idea that I wanted to take pictures of the high risk in order to, when somebody said sacrifice the weak, I could show them exactly who they were referring to when they said that. Because I think people got caught up in the statistics of the whole thing. So I wanted to humanize the high risk. And so kind of with this crazy idea in my head, I just texted a couple friends and I said that we're high risk. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing here, but can I photograph you? Like, yes, absolutely. And it turned into interviews as well, because I wanted to not only share their picture, I wanted to share their story. And so I spent most of 2020 interviewing and photographing the high risk in my community.
Madison Thorne, and I'll link to the episode and to Madison's work, so you can go and see more of her music work, actually, as we were just talking about that a moment ago. So this photo walk relies on you to send the pictures you make on your own walks and the messages and stories that you send in, which can be anything loosely to do with photography, art and filmmaking. So keep sending any photo stuff, any inspirational thoughts and questions that you have that you think may be a good talking point, and stories about what you've been making pictures about, so that we can together inspire a community of photographers across this globe. Neil, that should go on a t-shirt. Perhaps it should. I do actually have some merch. We have new merch. I don't really see myself as a merch person. We're not running a YouTube or Instagram channel with merch, I realise. But we have some merch that is very relevant to making walks. What, your own lower boots, Neil? The Photography Daily lower boots range? No, that would be great, but no, it's not that. What, the walking pants range? No, that too would be very good, very useful, but it's not that. What is it then, Neil? What is it? Can't tell you. Will tell you, though, next week. You tease. I know. So, if you're sending your pictures in, send them to the email address, which is studio@photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels on the long side. And that's the same address, of course, for sending in your 365 pictures. And, remember, send me a link to your website or social so that I can link back to you and others can join you on your web adventures. Now, on the 365 front, for the next week, you'll be seeing the pictures on that feature that we're making on our photo walk retreat. Did you know we're going on a retreat? Did you mention it, Neil? No, I don't think I did I? I think you did, yes. It's on the Isle of Wight, which, for those who don't know the UK geographically that well, it's right at the bottom of England. So it's right at the bottom, right next to Southampton and Portsmouth, just across the water there, and you're on an island, Next stop is Jersey and Guernsey after that, really. There are 6 of us on the retreat, taking time out of the world to talk and envelop ourselves in making pictures. And I dare say eating some pretty nice food. Well, I say I dare say, I know, I've booked the restaurants. Not bad, if I say so myself. You wouldn't want me cooking at the retreat, that's for sure. And then relaxing of the evening in our very snug barn in the middle of farmland and private woodland on the island, just to be able to sink ourselves into photo making for the week. And I've bought the world's most expensive pair of wellies the other day. So if it's not at least muddy on one day, I should be exceptionally disappointed. But all in all, next week's show, therefore, is going to be a little bit different. No, a lot a bit different, because you're going to be joining us as we make our walks and we take some of the photo challenges, which includes actually making a podcast. So it's going to be you, me, 5 housemates, and a week on the Isle of Wight. Now, I'll level with you. My biggest fear is Thursday night and the upload. I am miles from anywhere with a Wi-Fi link that can be a little bit tricky, and 4G. But I managed to upload some stuff last time I was at this particular location. So I'm let me touch some wood. There's enough wood to touch here in this forestry. Hold on. Here we go, touch wood. There we go, wood touched. Nothing can possibly go. Don't you say that, Neil. Okay, shh. Right, to this week's guest, Annette Lang. So, Annette is a German anthropologist living in Nice. Well, she's been living there for 2 decades. Nice, with its famous coastline, is part of the Côte d'Azur, literal translation, the Azure Coast, which is very important for today's story. Park that word, please, somewhere where you can get at it later on. This is one of those stories where you don't necessarily know as the protagonist that you're about to find out something that is going to creatively become your morning, noon and night thoughts. And that is the thing about photography, is it not? You like doing it 1 minute, then poof, you love doing it, and then suddenly, out of the blue, see what I did there? A project clicks into place. While France had some of the strictest rules on how far you could travel and where you could go and what you were allowed to do in the original lockdown, happenstance, which is one of my favorite words, and location, turn up to reward Annette Lang as she clutches her camera and takes a walk along the coast. Asked for 2 words to define your approach to street within your Instagram account, at least, Annette, you answered with whimsical street. I always think of whimsical as light-hearted and humorous, and that would be true. Probably to note that you do have a light-hearted approach to much of what you make pictures of, don't you?
Yeah, and actually, I seem to be very lucky of constantly running into scenes you wouldn't expect. So it was never an approach I consciously developed or thought to have. It sort of happened. And I am a huge fan of short descriptions. And so I got the comment of my photos were whimsical several times. So when I actually picked it up from nice people, writing as comments under my photo.
Well, you say you're lucky to run into people, but I think you make your own luck in life, particularly when you're making pictures on the street. And I wonder whether you're a hunter. We've used this term of late, actually, a hunter or a gatherer. How you find the subjects that you photograph.
Yeah, this is something that I have been thinking a lot about recently, because there are lots of terms in photography, especially in street photography, that are pretty much tapping into warfare, like, sniper, catcher, catch, hunt, snipe.
Oh my word, I've just done it as well,
and
haven't
so
I?
Shoot.
Yes.
And I'm actually more a bit of cooperating with the street around me. I feel like we are working as partners. The street has something on offer, and I sort of pick it up and collect it. There is a sort of give and take between the street and me. So sometimes there is a scene that I can photograph because it happens in front of my eye. But at the same time, I think there's a certain way of looking at the street that might make me see them more easily than other people. So I would say I actually am a collector.
And actually, that plays pretty well into the fact that you also describe yourself as a humanist photographer as well.
Yes, I do. It's a very important point for me because especially in our times with the very widespread possibility to take photos and to publish them so that they can be viewed by a huge number of people, it's important for me to underline that I understand myself as having a social responsibility holding a camera.
Well, I want to come back to the responsibility that all photographers have, not just street photographers, but we'll come back to that shortly. How did you recognize that street photography was your, can I call it muse? What attracted you to it? What was it about street photography that you thought, I feel at home here?
I think it's a long story. I grew up in a really small village in Germany, and so nothing much happened. And so if you wanted a story, you had to look for it. If you wanted to see something interesting, you had to open your eyes wide and you had to tune into your environments to see it. And so I actually became an observer. I just loved, seeing what happened and taking up a camera. That came back to me, but after a long time, because turning the camera onto my direct environment hadn't been easy. That's the funny thing. I loved, taking photos of my boys in a very intimate environment, or traveling fast, so where nobody knew me and I was a bit like not connected. And then saying, okay, I'm going to photograph what is lying at my feet. The environment I'm part of and I belong to took some time, and it happened thanks to, quite paradoxically speaking, lockdown.
So why did lockdown make that difference? And I know you had quite a strict one enforced in France.
Because there was no possibility to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to go out, it was 1 kilometer around my home. And since I live close to the sea, I was quite lucky. And first it was space. It was about space, was restricted space. Then it's about pace. So the work was slowed down. So I was slowed down. I wasn't running back and forth and hurrying. I just had one thing to do, is just walk and watch. And this connected me back to this childhood experience I described, where in a village where nothing much happened and where the world was swinging in a very slow space, I had the time to watch. And so having the blue sky and the sea as a canvas, made everybody evolving around the blue chairs really stand out, because the only striking element that was salient from the cognitive point of view were people, for instance, gesturing.
Well, I'm going to come to the blue chairs, which are a part of Nice, and the blue sky, which is definitely a part of Nice, and the blue sea, shortly. But this couldn't have been a better creative outlet for you, could it? This genre, given your anthropological training, you have a general fascination for people anyway. Of course, you're trained in it, aren't you?
Yeah, it is totally. Now I can say it was logical. I didn't connect it, but I really love seeing people. And I love detecting patterns. So to really realize people have a reason to do what they do, and to develop a keen eye for normalcy, which is one of the most complicated things to do. I used the term of saliency before, because you only see what sort of stands out. And when you see somebody do something completely normal, quite often you might overlook it for the very reason of it being normal, which is, for me, as an anthropologist, the reason why we often take better photos when we are abroad, because so many people appeal to us. And here, actually, it was observing what was going on without it being special in itself, and still see it was special. So it's the hidden obvious, or to be the obvious hidden. So to see something that is right out there, but I hadn't seen before because it didn't strike me as standing out.
I wonder also, to an extent, whether if we as photographers, we all have the anthropologist about us. Maybe we do.
I think they stem from a common root. I think they grow out of the same root of being interested in people, patterns, meaning, in observing, in making sense of the world around us.
Well, look, I went right back to the start of your Insta posts. I always think of Instagram like reading a book, and it's always good to start right at the beginning and see how it develops. To use a pun, photographic pun, and right at the start of your Instagram, there's many pictures of the old town of Nice. It's a place I've been many years ago, and I love it. It's an absolutely glorious place. There's these intimate streets, but then there's a woman. There's a picture of a woman in deep thought, a very chic Nice picture in many respects, but she's looking out to the ocean and she looks full of thought. And for me, that's when I start to see your pictures physically move out to the shoreline. That's
true. Well, actually, the two of them, I mean, the old town and the sea are extremely close to each other. They are literally a stone throw apart from each other. So this is also connected to weather. So sometimes when it's really hot, it's better to be in the old town because you're too hot on the seaside. Yeah. And if it's a darker day, you don't have any light in the old town because of the narrow alleys. And so I actually went back and forth between of them according to light, according to temperature. And then I noticed this blue sky, working as a canvas and not having disturbing elements and actually disturbing, in inverted commas. Yeah. And actually the probability of somebody walking into a picture I wanted to take was less. So to a certain extent, it was laziness.
We've mentioned these blue chairs a couple of times now. We both have. So we should probably talk about them. Now, I know what they are. But there's a sort of a history behind the blue chairs that sit on the promenade at Nice, aren't there? And these are the chairs that are often the muse within your photographs, the place where people come to rest, to sit, sometimes to stand on them, or stand in front of them or behind them. Well, what are these chairs?
These chairs are what comes close to being a collective outdoor space in Nice. They have a long story going back to the 1930s when they were white and wooden and people could put them where they wanted. And then they moved into blue in a bit of a branding movement of, Côte d'Azur, meaning the blue coast, and then the blue chairs, and having the specific blue, which is protected, having a, specific design. And then we had this naughty side of the Niçois people of walking away with the chairs. So instead of having them mobile, they were rifted together in long lines, so people cannot walk away with them or, put them somewhere else or do anything else. And so they come in lines, and they come in lines of different lengths. Yeah. Well, so sometimes it's 11 chairs, sometimes it's 19. It's most often an odd number. And they look out on the sea. They have only disappeared once from the scenery, which was during the second lockdown, because people needed to be prevented from sitting close to each other. And so since space in Nice is expensive and most people cannot afford a garden or a private outdoor space, I think the blue chairs are a collective outdoor room where we can come together, talk or not talk to each other, where you meet, but then you have to specify which line of blue chairs you're meeting. And so that for me, they have a profoundly personal and collective function in these.
So these blue chairs against a canvas of a blue sky and blue sea is for the main part, your wonderfully simple compositions are looking out to sea and featuring the characters that sit in these chairs. It's the art of simplicity. Apart from the fact that in France, street photography is not necessarily a simple exercise, is it?
So in general, there's a very strict law in France when it comes to photographing people. So I think it's one of the strictest laws in the world is the French law on photography on personal rights. So to cut a complicated story very short, basically you're not allowed to take somebody's photos in a way that makes this person identifiable without their consent.
The light humour in your pictures, Annette, the subtle stories within the smallest details sometimes in the pictures that draw that make these things come alive. But there is one thing I notice about your pictures, and that's, it might sound a bit strange, but that's what I hear. Because there's an enormous sort of tranquility to your pictures as well.
Yeah, it's something I personally seek and I personally try to find is tranquility and calm and harmony. And to that extent, the very fact of myself going out taking photos might have a slightly meditative streak. To find those moments of peace and quiet in the midst of a medium-sized town. And I do not go out at 6 o'clock in the morning on a regular basis, and I do not Photoshop people. So if there's only one person, then there is only one person. And that too is the magic of photography, because you cut out a rectangular portion of a huge world by the section you have in your viewfinder. And sometimes a slight step to the left or right would give a completely different feeling because you would have more people in the frame. So yeah, it is something I'm really consciously looking for.
But am I right as well to, because I'm sure I read or saw in an interview, the fact that you generally don't photograph certain colours. I mean, you work with a palette of blue, obviously, as we've talked about. But green, for example, is a colour that you have. Well, maybe issue is too strong a word, but you seem to have an issue with. Although there are some phenomenal pictures that feature green, such as the wonderful one of the coronavirus, person dressed as a coronavirus, sitting on one end of a bench, and a chap sitting at completely the other end of the bench, which is wonderful. There's lots of humour in that. But you don't generally take pictures of green things.
Well, actually, first of all, while my environment plays a very important role in that choice of colors, I may call it a choice, because we've got blue sky and blue sea and blue chairs and so on. So there is a lot of blue. Second is technical. For whatever reason, I'm now an expert would know, my camera is much better at blues than at greens. Right. So the greens always have a strange tint to it. And I don't seem to fix that correctly in editing. So it is, I think, we can call it incompetence when it comes to green. So that, well, I have to confess guilty to color incompetence on that account.
Isn't that funny? Because I spoke to a photographer called Jim Mortram, who I asked in one of my questions to him was, why did he photograph everything exclusively black and white? And he looked at me and said, you know why? And I said, why? He said, my colour monitor doesn't work. So it's always been black and white. So that's actually, I find that very authentic of you, that you've said, well, I just can't seem to get a green to work for me.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a huge difference actually in artificial greens and nature greens. So in artificial greens, like that virus, I get by. Yeah. I can fix that. But when it comes to natural greens, like, vegetation, trees, I don't get it right.
And is that the same for black and white then? The reason why you don't choose black and white is because you don't have any strong feeling for it. You can't seem to feel your photographs through the medium of monochrome in quite the same way either.
I think that is connected to my vision of things. I really have a very keen color vision. Yeah. So I naturally have a very keen color vision and a very good color memory. So I can really memorize when I see a red and I'm looking for something in the same red. I normally don't get it wrong. And I had, at some point of my life, I had lost a huge part of my color vision. And I had to train color vision again. And I went to therapy, and there were lots of these small, color blocks, and I had to sort them out into greens and blues and reds and pinks and oranges. And then inside each shade, I had to, sort them according to intensity. And I was so happy to get back to my color vision that for me, it's a celebration of, photographing in color. I've enormous respect for black and white photographers. So far, I don't feel ready. I don't have the impression I've got a color and a black and white vision allowing me to compose a picture accordingly.
And Annette Lang returns for the second part of the story shortly. A mention for our wonderful patrons who feed me with coffee each month. Feed me, Seymour. What was that from? Feed me, Seymour. Little Shop of Horrors. There we go. Yes, feed me with coffee each month. Well, they don't literally feed me with coffee. That would be daft, wouldn't it? Figuratively, you feed me with coffee. As for the price of one high street coffee per month, patrons are so important to helping maintain a future for this cast. Your donation to the show is helping to grow this cast, and it really is. And it's helping me to help build the community. Did that make sense? It's helping me to build the community. So many plans, so many thoughts. The podcast, as I said earlier on, this is not just my passion project now. This is something that I really want to develop. Certainly with the Photowalk, and one thing that's become patently clear to me over the last, how long is it now? 18 months, nearly. Is it? No, it can't be 2 years. It's not 2 years. 18 months. No, it is. Is it two? Oh, do you know that's the thing about this lockdown, this whole Corona thing? You forget where you are. What happened 2 years ago? No idea. Did we go into lockdown? Oh, I don't know. I closed the door, I came out again, and all hell had broken out. Where were we? Sorry, lost in thoughts. Yes, one of the things that's I suppose really impressed upon me is just how important photography is to so many people for mental health, including myself. And I'll include this. This podcast is about photography, and I make pictures while I make the podcast. So yes, mentally it's been a lifeline for me as well. And you're part of that, patrons. You're part of building the podcast to do more and be out there more, see more people. And one of the things I'd like to do more is go on walks all over the UK, and who knows, maybe one day world, if we can get back in one of those I just can't get this word, no, it'll come to me. You can join Patreon from our link on the website, photographydaily.show, and you get to hear the extra. Well, there's all sorts of things that we do, but one of those things is the more episodes of a Saturday. And starting this week, tomorrow, 5 Things, a new feature which is where I've been Zooming with our patrons, asking them what 5 things about photography are important to them, what they love about it, why in many cases it really is that important link to mental health. It's a patron-only feature for the More show, though I'm going to play you a couple of snippets in a moment so you don't feel completely left out of it. That's important to me. We'll play a few snippets from the 5 Things feature in a moment for you. Right, a brace of mails. One from Kian Palber. Hi Neil, a mail to say thank you for featuring the work of Niels Armelinks last week. What an inspiring man on all fronts. If ever there were proof of the mental benefits creativity can bring, this would be it. I've been listening since the episode where you spoke with Pete Souza, President Obama's photographer, 2 of my personal heroes. But this was an episode that is one I'll be coming back to time and time again. I'd imagine his family are immeasurably proud. Yes, I would imagine they are. If you haven't heard last week's episode with Niels Armelinks, it's I think it's an incredible story with a man who I really am hoping to go and take a photo cycle with. But I've made him promise that has to be if he's taking me up these huge mountainous, they're not even hills, these are mountains, on a bike, I want something that has a little bit of electrical help. Thank you very much. And, we've been talking about making pictures in the mist a bit of late, haven't we? Like gorillas in the mist, but with far less Oscars and no Sigourney Weavers. Well, Wim Trenier has been seeking some pictures in the mist and the fog, and has got some great pictures that I'm going to include on today's show page. I tell you what, the show page today is particularly rich with pictures. It really is. I think this is probably one of the busiest show pages we've had for a while. So make sure you go visit it today. Go to photographydaily.show, then hit the episode page for today. Hi Neil, says Wim. It's been a while since I wrote to you. Something to do with Hagelslag, if I recall correctly. I probably said that wrong, haven't I? Or incorrectly. Wrong? Incorrectly. I haven't pronounced it correctly. We'll get there. Hagelslag. It's a Dutch delicacy. In case you missed me explaining it before, I don't think I'm going to make it sound like a delicacy, but I'll do my best. I might take some of this to the retreat. That will be like, I've seen the breakfast list, what people prefer to have for their breakfast, and I'm telling you, it would not have hagelslag on it. It's essentially sugar, fruit sugar, tiny bits of matted sugar, that then you sprinkle it onto your toast and you eat it. It's like sugar on toast. And I know I'm not selling it very well to you. I appreciate that. But it's well, I understand in Holland, it used to be, maybe it's not now. Maybe in this slightly different world that we live in, where we appreciate that pouring sugar onto your toast of a morning is probably not the best way to bring your kids up. But from my experiences of our Dutch friends that used to holiday with us in Cornwall all the time, in the independent state that is Cornwall, they used to live off this stuff, and they got me hooked on it too. And I mentioned it, and actually, my wife bought me some for Christmas. This little I opened it up, and this little packet. I thought, oh, where did you get that from? It was a very exciting moment for me. So I do remember you writing to me about that, Wim. I love to listen to the very inspirational podcast. You're very kind, Wim, thank you. Usually I do spread it over a couple of lunch walks. When time permits, I love being out there with my camera photographing the landscape. We've had our share of foggy conditions recently in the Netherlands, so I took the opportunity and grabbed some pictures on a couple of different walks close to my little weekend retreat on the Veluwe. Oh, sounds lovely. I'm sure that's the way you pronounce that, isn't it? On the Veluwe. Veluwe. I sound like those lessons that my youngest does of the evening. He's getting very good at Norwegian, by the way. Oh, really, Neil? That's really handy for you. Oh, well, it will be, because we're going to Norway at some stage soon, aren't we? So, yeah, in an give that one up, Neil. Recent chats on the show led me to think a bit more in black and white, says Wim. In the photography sense, that is. And I found that black and white works really well for most of these foggy shots, although I've included one in colour. I love, by the way, and it's on the show page today, I love the pastel calmness of the colour one. Absolutely gorgeous. Actually, all of them have this delicious, smooth approach to them, Wim. So, yes, go see those on the show page today, and I'll pop a link up there as well so you can see a bit more of Wim's work. So let's take a few moments then to take in what photography means to you, and in this case our patrons who've been sharing their 5 things stories. Now on the More shows you hear all 5 as it's part of a series, but I thought you might like to hear just a couple. We'll start with Nicky Heppenstall, and then I thought bringing it round, making the story into a circle, since we've mentioned him already. A few words also from Andrew Hardacre.
The first thing that came to mind was my dad. I was 19 when my dad died. He was a keen photographer. There was a dark room at home when I was little. So whenever I go into a dark room and smell those chemicals, I'm immediately taken back to being yay big and being told to stand there and don't touch anything. So my dad was a keen photographer, and it's because he died when I was 19. We never had the opportunity to properly share this. I did have a boost in somatic or something in my teens, but I wasn't really, interested, because you're not when you're a teenager, really. So I never had the opportunity for us to go off on a photo walk. That would have been marvellous, for us to go off and explore this and that and this place and that place and take photographs and then, compare notes later. That would have been marvellous. So photography is a link with my dad, because I know we would have embraced the shared interest.
My first thing is connecting to people through photography. Over my life, I suppose, I've become a bit of a people watcher, and I like watching behavior. And photography is my entry to meeting people. So sometimes I end up talking to people and then actually forgetting to take the photograph. And that doesn't really matter to me, but photography is the way I find a conduit to engaging with people. But there's another aspect to it that I think is equally valuable, and that is the connection to people who have gone before us. Now, what I mean by that is that, like most people of my age, I suspect, when your parents pass on, you inherit the photographic collection. And I had several photograph albums, but I also had a biscuit tin. And I suspect a lot of people have got a biscuit tin with a lot of old prints in them, and some of them are no bigger than a postage stamp. But these are amazing photographs. They show me what my parents were like before they met. There is one photograph in particular that I found from my father, which is a picture of a viaduct near where he lived, and on the back is written what is the lyrics to a song, and I suspect they were written for my mother when they were courting. And it's just that a photograph can carry that connection over the years, and it doesn't have to be contemporary, it can also be historic.
5 Things, which starts this weekend on the Moore Show, and it's available, of course, on the very easy to download Patreon app, which I think is a great app. I'm quite a fan of the Patreon app, actually. I'm a patron of a few things myself. It's got a great way to leave comments. It's another sort of audio player. Well, it is. It's not sort of. It's another audio player. And for those that have, and you get instructions on the Patreon app, for those who are patrons, you can actually use that app to download this show as well. Yes, you can. So, Kattegard from Denmarkland, 2 mentions in as many weeks, Katta. People will start talking. But you did send in some super pictures for the show page from the Isle of Wight. Neil, are you going to the Isle of Wight by any chance? Have you mentioned it before? No, I don't think I have. Shall I mention it? No. Not again. Hi, Neil. When you mentioned the Isle of Wight, it brought back some fond memories. 9 years ago, in October 2013, when we lived in London, my wife had a week's study leave, which she, for some reason, decided to spend at, now I think you pronounce this Car Abbey, pretty sure, with the monks on the Isle of Wight. She found, these are the things she found, in order of importance, no doubt. Peace and contemplation. See? Now that sounds perfect already. If it were the checklist at the start of the show, I'd say check, friendly monks. So, see, that feeds into that wonderful place. Check, definitely. Horrible food. Oh, you've stopped selling it to me. And no wine. Now, Katta, I'm no soak in my old age, but I'm getting a picture of the cells. No, horrible food and no wine. Mind you, to be honest, you can't exactly contemplate very well after 3.5 glasses of Chateau Neuf de Foule over, can you? So it's probably quite reasonable of the monks to operate this way. At the weekend, Katta said, I drove down to rescue her and visit the island. We stayed at a lovely B&B with wine, and the weather was perfect for walking as well as for taking photos. Autumn sun, blustery showers, perfect. Back then I was rather obsessed with film photography, and I brought my beloved Contax T2 and some rolls of Kodak Portra 400 for the trip. Not the obvious combination for landscapes, but I managed to get a few keepers, especially 1 or 2 from Tennyson Down. Quick bit of history, some reference. Tennyson Down is a hill at the west end of the Isle of Wight, just south of Totland. Tennyson Down is a grassy, whale-backed ridge of chalk, which rises to 147 metres above sea level. Tennyson Down is named after the poet Lord Tennyson, who lived at nearby Farringford House for nearly 40 years. Anyways, back with Katta's mail. I went through the rolls after listening to your podcast and picked out a handful of which I attach. It made me really miss England and film photography as well. Since it's not a recent photo walk, I don't expect you to feature the photographs. Inviting everyone to historical photo walks might be opening a can of worms. I don't know, you know. If it's a walk and it inspires somebody to make theirs, I think we can live with a few historic photo walk pictures. I'm sure. Best regards from Katta. I'll pop his pictures on the show page. Right. Part 2 now of my guest, Annette Lang, the German anthropologist, making these fabulous studies of people who walk the shorefront in Nice by the famous blue seats. I want to come back to this idea of the laws that you have in France. As you say, it's one of the most difficult places in the world, I think, to photograph street photography anyway, because of gaining permission from the subjects you shoot. It does look to me like you do sometimes engage with your subjects. I would assume you engage with them after the photograph and ask them then if you can make a photograph. Does that make it, though, harder in the actual practice of making a photograph in the first place? Because people are quite aware of their rights in France, aren't they?
They are very much aware. And as a person, I don't hide. So if I take a photo, I take a photo in the open. So I'm not standing behind a tree and sort of sniping.
Not shooting from the hip or anything like that, no.
Nothing.
No.
I don't do it. So quite often what happens is when I take photos in which people are identifiable, either I approach people directly afterwards, but I never want to intrude. So for instance, if they are, enjoying time to themselves, I wouldn't go and step forward and say, you know what, I just took your photo. Yeah. This is a small place. So I quite often run into the same people again. And then quite often I have transferred it to my cell phone. And, I say, the other day I took a photo of you, even sometimes if it's from the back, and I show them. And it happened very often that people were really happy.
What do you, we talk responsibility, and I think you've answered this to an extent, but what do you think our responsibility is as photographers? Because, there are more and more and more street photographers. It's become, for many, a pastime, actually. That's their refuge and their solace. So many describe, things like the mental benefits. But we do have a responsibility, don't we?
For me, that's a very important point, and I would want this point to be discussed more intensively with photographers and to develop more awareness.
Yeah.
As I said, there's a whole list of things that start with not rather than what to do, is not expose people, not, don't do any things that when you profit from a weakness because they sleep. People who eat quite often do not look very graceful because you have to open your mouth and you might even have to stick your tongue out. And so it's not a moment in which you feel the most elegant or in which you would want to recognize yourself. Or people who even lift their hand because they don't want to get photographed. There are loads of that kind of picture on Instagram, and I personally don't do that because the people try to protect themselves. So for me, it is important to think about who am I with my camera with respect to the community I involve in, community as in the other people on the street. What is my liability for the split second I actually freeze? And one very simple thing for me is I would shake hands with every person in my photos. And if I weren't ready to shake hands with the person I'm photographing, then I have no right to photograph the person.
So that's your barometer, whether you'd actually like to have physical contact in that respect.
For me, taking somebody's photo is a strong relationship with that person, which is made easy now because you snap and you walk away. But still, it is for me a social split second. And I think it's just important to think about, am I or would I be ready to engage in a social relationship with that person beyond snapping? And I don't know if you read about the French photographer who died last week in Paris. He fell down in the street and apparently was unconscious, and he was lying in the street for an entire night without anybody stopping by, and he died.
Oh.
And now there's a huge story about how awful it is nobody stopped. This indifference is part of quite often street photography. You take homeless people or you take, poor people. And for me, this is perfectly fine when people do social documentary work. But if you are only a street photographer, what do you want? What story do you want to tell with the pictures you are taking or making?
I interviewed Gonara Samoilova probably a year ago now. And of course, you are now a feature of, if I can call it, the movement, really, women street photographers or organisations. And we talked about the 100 photographers featured in her original book. And I remember she said to me, well, there might well be a second coming out, Neil. So this is my cheeky way of asking whether you're going to be in the second one.
Not that I know of.
You're very diplomatic. One of the things I did talk about with Gonala was it's no longer the boys' club. that unfortunately has been described as sometimes, and though history will reveal a number of important photographic figures, there are some extraordinary talents that Gulnara has brought to the world, aren't there?
Oh yeah, I mean, she's doing an amazing work and showcasing women's work. And I think we are the lucky ones in the sense of we are allowed to walk the street. We have a possibility. We've got income structures that allow us to take time to just walk the street. We can make time for picking up our cameras. And I think this might not be the case for women everywhere in the world. So I think behind the fact of us taking photos, there's a huge change in living conditions that need to be met for women or for anybody to pick up a camera, go and take photos.
Having found an almost spiritual type of home then along the shoreline in Nice, and that's what I see when I look at your photographs. It does feel like a spiritual home to you. What plans do you have now, Annette?
Yeah, that's a difficult question for me because I don't seem to be functioning along plans. So I seem to have this strong, intimate relationship with the street. It's a bit like the street is telling me what the street can show me. Yeah. Sounds really strange and mystical, but this is what happened to me is I'm only partly deciding what's jumping into my camera. So I would really like to do more portrait work, which is for the aforementioned reasons quite difficult. And again, I'm a bit right now in the social responsibilities thing, and I was wondering if I could do some good with my camera in a place that is not France, not the seaside, in which, documentary work would be required, and which I could do because I have a camera and I know to a certain extent how to use it. So I was thinking about, refugee camps in Greece or something. So I would really be interested in social documentary work, but I consider I would need training to do this correctly.
And can you imagine not making pictures? I mean, where would your anthropology have led you if it weren't for making pictures now, for example? Well,
I've recently started sewing, and I think one of my dream jobs would have been, making costumes for a theater and opera.
Yes.
So it's something completely different, but creating, seeing cloth and colors and textures and touch and to make something. What I actually like is making and creating things. So whatever it is, if it weren't a camera, I think it would have been something else creative.
And my thanks to Annette Lang. There are a few more moments, actually, from that interview that I'll be editing to play soon on the More Show as well. So, tomorrow then, I'll be leaving the family for the week. And Barney, who had his first puppy cut during the week. Really, I think I'd said he's beginning to look a bit like a small brown sheep. And so he went in to see Marie, who was a little bit... I hope she's not listening to this show. She won't be. But Marie said a couple of things that sounded a bit Trunchbullion, if you know the film or the play or the book that I'm talking about. But he seemed all right. I left Barney with the Trunchbull, and she made a cracking job of it, and he looked absolutely gorgeous. Marie, you were brilliant, and you can give me a proper little flick around the ear the next time you see me for that. She was brilliant. Marie, you were fantastic. Although I know you're probably not listening to a photography show. You're joking, Neil, aren't you? Marie's so into photography, she didn't tell you. Oh, really? Could be in trouble then. But yeah, he does look gorgeous. And I feel like I could have brought him to down this photo walk. He'd have loved it in here. Absolutely loved it. I'm a bit nervous about taking him out in the summertime through places like this because I keep being warned by dog owners. Oh, look, over there. I thought it was a dog, but it wasn't. There's small deer. There's 3, 4, 5 of them, and I've got entirely the wrong lens on here. They are beautiful. I wonder if I stoop down. No, he's looking at me. So hold on a minute. Let me try and get this. You're going to move, I know. This is going to be a bit like a Where's Wally picture because shutter speed 100th, f4, 640. This is a sketchbook picture, if ever you've seen one, because It's way off in the distance. So if I dare put this picture up, because really, honestly, it's like the ones my mum used to make of the red arrows. There's the red arrows. What? That dot in the sky? Mum, you've got entirely the wrong camera for this job. If I dare put it up, you can see if you can identify where the wildlife is in my pictures. I don't know where we were now. We were talking about Barney. Oh yes, Barney. He could. Yes, I've had some. That's where we were. I've had some conversations with dog owners. They've scared me witless about adders walking through some parts in nature where you've got adders who apparently not, who can't. They wouldn't. I mean, we don't have the sort of snakes you have in Australia land, which only need to look at you and they can cause you a problem. Adders is about as bad as it gets here, but they're not very good for dogs. So if you're a dog owner, you can write me now and say, Neil, stop worrying. You're absolutely fine. Simon Baxter takes Jess, doesn't he, on his woodland YouTube films all the time, and no problem there at all. Maybe I should talk to Simon. He'd tell me to stop being silly about it. But Barney could have come with us today. He'd have loved it in here. Really would have loved it. I tell you what, these deer are getting closer and closer to me. Look, I think I've been accepted. Maybe they're Photowalk fans. So tomorrow then, yes, I'm leaving the family for a week. I'm climbing aboard the ferry. It's the St. Clair. Yes, you even get the name when you book the ferries to go to the Isle of Wight. And I'm making the short voyage across to the island for the photo retreat, meeting up with these like-minded photographers, spending the week photo walking and making pictures and taking in a few challenges, one of which, as I said, is going to be producing this here show. Now, if for any reason we are not here with the episode next Friday, do not fear. It won't have been for the want of trying. I am at the mercy, as I say, of Wi-Fi and 4G. 5G has not come to the Jurassic Coast just yet, but you'll get updates of what we're up to during the week on the Community 365 feature on the website. So if you want to follow us on the journey, you can do. And if the show goes, if the Friday photo walk becomes a Saturday photo walk next week, you'll know why. Okay, it's probably because putting my foot in a bucket of water and holding on to the lightning conductor of the local church in Ryde on Thursday night didn't quite work as I wanted it to. But anyway, where there's a will, there's a Catherine. I know, very English joke. But wish me luck. Right, play out song. That song that takes you just a little bit further along the track to make a few extra pictures today. And it just has to have, I think, a slight French feeling today, does it not? So as we play out, be sure this weekend to send me your pictures from your photo walks with your stories too, please, so that we can feature them on the Photo Walk show. Ah oui, Neil, mais bien sûr, continuez ma chère, which I think was roughly, we'll do that, crack on with your walk, he says, with a distinctly stand out in the crowd English accent.
Mes yeux fermés
that's it for this week. My thanks to Annette Lang, Mark Wilson, Madison Thorne, Nikki Heppenstall and Andrew Hardacre, and all those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website, photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow we're going to hear Nikki's 5 things I love about photography in full, plus trolling. I've been trolled, but I'm really rather relieved. Plus pictures on a page visits a picture by Platon. It's almost poetic. Next week, join me with my 5 special housemates for the week on our Photowalk retreat. You'll be like the 7th member of the house, but bring your walking boots and, of course, a camera. Music on the show from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Well, Carl, I think we better head home. We've got some packing to do for tomorrow. Have you mentioned the merch?
No, don't mention the merch. And only mention the merch next week on the show.
Ooh, all right then. What's the first rule about merch on the Photowalk?
Don't mention the merch. Something like that.
Are you going to clean me?
What?
Well, I don't want to be looking like this meeting new friends.
Oh, okay. We'll go via the car wash on the way back.
Oh, that's right. Make me feel really special.
What do you mean?
I thought you might clean me by hand.
Don't push your luck.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.